All right, hello. Welcome to History Chats this afternoon. Yeah, we're going to get started in just a couple minutes. As always, we're just going to make sure everything's working and give people a chance to join if they're interested in learning about, in this case, the Village of Elderon, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Yeah. Okay, that looks like everything seems to be working, which is always a good sign. While we're waiting, let me just tell you a little bit about what's coming up. So yeah, we're talking about villages this month in History Chats. I think at the end here we'll tell you we got one more. We're not quite to the end of August here, so we got one more History Chats coming up. Next time we're going to talk about Spencer. So we're going to round out the villages. We're going to go from the east side of the county to the west. So that'll be a good program, hopefully. I'm in the process of putting it together, so we'll see. But yeah, it should be good. Yeah, also coming up at the end of the month here, on the 27th, we have our History Speaks lecture series returns with a program by Michael Gach on the history of the Badger the Badger Army ammunition plant. So powder, people, and place, based off of I believe, a book that he wrote about that topic. So he's going to go into that. It's not something that maybe we are as familiar with here, but an important industry and maybe a surprising one for Wisconsin. So yeah, that's coming up on August 27th. That'll be at 2 o'clock on Saturday. And that will be largely in person, although we will be trying to record it and maybe live stream it if the internet cooperates. For those of you who can't maybe make it into Wausau to the Historical Society here. But yeah, that's coming up. Yeah, I guess there's some other things that I was, could always, cemetery tour where, those of you who are interested in that every year, we're getting well into the plans for that. That'll be coming up later, and we'll, tell you about that as we know more. Great. Cool. So I think that's everything. Why don't we? I guess we can just kind of jump into it here. So I'm going to introduce. Here is Gary. Talk about Elderon.
Thank you very much, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. So today we're speaking about Elderon, and what you have in front of you is a person and familiar scenes that we've seen before: lumbering, railroads. Of course, they are a part of the Elderon story. But Elderon, of course, is, as with other villages, other places that we've visited so far this year, there's always lessons to be gotten from these small little villages and or places in Marathon County. So I would, these lessons, these stories that we present every week, lead us into larger stories of Marathon County. They aren't individual stories sitting out there, but they all are part of the swing, the march of Marathon County history. And Elderon is a little bit of that, part of that here in southeastern Wisconsin, southeastern Marathon County. So greetings from Elderon. We're going to be talking a little bit about that history this afternoon. But first of all, we want to just tell you where Elderon is. It's in the great southeastern part of Marathon County, almost over into the bordering Shawano County, sort of that fringe over there. And we'll tell that story, but it's over there in the southeastern part of Marathon County off of 153 and Highway 49. So here we go. So this is also the town of Elderon, Township 27, Range 10 East. This is sort of a little bit of a makeup of the town. It is all, like I said, it is also called the town of Elderon, but Elderon has its own own little history. But before I move on, I just want to point out a part of this town's history also deals with what we see to the north of the town. Elderon, as you can see, is going to be towards the south part of the town. But to the north, we have the Ingersoll sawmills. Ingersoll came in, that was also a part of this town, the Ingersoll sawmills, which started in a small way the history of this Elderon. So, but let's go to 1900, and we see a little bit of a confusing map. We see Elderon Post Office over in the Day area, Clarence Day area, and something called Fertilia Post Office over next to Lily Lake. This was all going to be changing within the next few years. This is all going to be changing. But the important thing also to notice with regard to this map is the railroad coming down. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But take a look at the names, because in Hatley and in Bevent, we saw the movement of people coming up from Portage County, the Polish people. Over in the Elderon area, we start to see some Scandinavians, the Petersons, the Ackermans, the Gersons. So this movement of people coming up from Iola, Wapaka, which was a Scandinavian area, Iola, Scandinavia. So we now start to see the movement of Scandinavians up into this territory. It is also, of course, Polish and German, of course, like all of rest of Marathon County. It is a great mix, but specifically in this area, and we see the Scandinavians, especially the Norwegians, moving up on this part of Marathon County, up further north to Echo Corners and Bethany Church up to the north of northern Marathon County. But just a little bit about Elderon. Just some dates. 1888, the Elderon Post Office was established that you saw on the map. Louis Jacobson in 1899 began with a logging camp. 1900, the Fertilia Post Office, 1900, it was there from 1900 to 1904. In 1903, we'll talk about that in a little bit, Elderon relocated to its current site. We have a map on that. And then it became a village in 1917. So here we see a more modern map, 1930, a little bit more modern, 30 years later. The railroad's still coming down, but we see Elderon is where it is today, next to Lily Lake. It is taken over that. They basically moved Elderon, and basically they moved the post office into this little section of the town of Elderon, mostly because of the railroad. The railroad was coming down, and I think they felt that the railroad was a good place to land, and so they moved this Elderon, and thus it became a village, like I said, in 1917, next to Lily Lake. On this map, which we can see, we can also notice the Scandinavian names, but we also see by 1900 into 1930, we see something called the Moore Galloway Company, which was the large lumber company. So we see that the lumber is starting to take a prominence in this part of southeastern Marathon County. The railroad's there, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but early on, I just wanted to go back a little bit because the Calvin Calvin Day. This was one of the original homesteads in Elderon, was the Calvin Day homestead. That's where the original Elderon post office was, this little homestead, and it continued. The land continued to be in the Day property, in the Day family, for quite a while. But another person in this in Elderon was A.J. Peterson, and Mr. Peterson's son Allard came to write a great chronicle of Elderon. It's called Tales of Old Elderon. And Allard is quoting his grandmother, or Mrs. Peterson. I think this would have been his grandmother. And I just want to quote, because I think I've never heard a person describe coming into Marathon County, especially coming into rural Marathon County, like she did. This is in a book, like I said, Tales of Old Elderon. But Mrs. Allard says Mrs. Peterson first saw the Elderon Forest as a girl of 16 in 1894. And she goes on, in the beginning, God made heaven and earth. In our beginning, we, the pioneers, selected this portion of God's beautiful earth to be our homes. For in the early days, it was a beautiful beyond compare, with its tall pines and hemlocks intertwined with the leafy branches of maple, basswood, and birch, high above the dusty roads. The deep and dark forest of the pine and hemlock were so deep and dark that no ray of sunlight penetrated to the forest floor. Only a few straggling blades of grass tried to cover the dark brown leaf mold on the ground. Then, too, there were the clear, shining waters of the trout streams, the lakes dotted with lilies of snowy white, and the almost impenetrable swamps surrounded by feathery tamarack. In the early spring, one could dig in the moist, cool leaves and find the dainty trailing arbutus, while there was yet snow in protected places. Soon came the violets, mayflowers, and spring beauties, followed by white trilliums and blue phlox. Later there appeared wild roses, Turk's turbans, and cattails around marshes and along streams. And there it went. But we really are not have access to little journals like this that describe what it meant for an early settler. That life was hard for these early settlers, living in log cabins, trying to eke out a living. But yet these words sort of describe, and I would think in a beautiful way, some of the ways that people were still approaching living in this part of Marathon County, and the story that I think you'll find in Settlers echoing these words in every town, every township in this county in central Wisconsin. So I just wanted to, I thought they were really quite well written, and I wanted to share that with you. And again, this is Mr. Peterson. First cabin built in the town of Elderon in the late 1800s. And then he posed for this in 1897. Again, Mr. Peterson, this was in the Daily Herald in 1980, a feature story on Elderon and Mr. Peterson. Another story that, of course, we have to come to is the story of the railroad. We don't have the story of railroad we talked about again in the Hatley story, that railroad coming over from Eland into Marathon County, early days, the Milwaukee Lakeshore and Western, the Chicago Northwestern. There was a branch coming down from Eland into this part of Marathon County. It was at one time called the Sherry Line, but then eventually in 1900, maybe a little bit, maybe a few years later, it came to be called the Chicago Northwestern, and they basically moved the Sherry line over to include Elderon. But a very important part of the growth of Elderon was the lumber. The lumber was, like I said, the more Galloway lumber fields. It was a very important part of the economy of Elderon and an important part of the economy and workforce of this part of Marathon County. And again, here, very typical picture of harvesting of the lumber, eventually most likely taking it to the rail lines in Elderon and up into Ingersoll and up into Eland. And of course, the other thing that was part of this part of Marathon County was the potato fields. The sandy soil that is part of Portage County is also part of this part of Marathon County and extends really up into parts of Langley County. And this was great potato fields, a part of, this is Elderon. This is what they were doing also in addition to the lumbering, which also put Elderon and this part of Marathon County on the map. And here we have, the depots. And if you take a look at the picture, what are you seeing? You're seeing some lumber piled up. You'll start to see the lumber field, and notice the two tracks. So it was a very busy depot here in Elderon. Again, a passenger, not only the movement of potatoes and lumber along this line up to Eland was the passenger lines coming through here once a day. So here we have from Eland, leaving Eland at 1:45, coming into Elderon at 2:05. Not a very long trip for people wanting to spend some time in Elderon or Galloway or Rosholt. But the main destination of this branch was through Galloway and Rosholt in Portage County. And then, of course, if you wanted to go back to Eland that same day, you can get the train back. So they have this line running daily, except on Sunday, second class only. So here is another. So again, this is another picture of the depot, and you can a little bit further explanation of the lumber. The lumber's waiting. The milk cans are waiting. So again, a lot of movement of product out of Elderon. But one of the intriguing things with this picture was what's in those cases. So if you look close enough, Marathon City Brewing. So what is Marathon? Just a question I ask. What is Marathon City Brewing shipping their beer over to Elderon? So it comes through that same line over from Marathon City over to Eland and then down here to Elderon. Most likely these are empty. Most likely they're going back to Marathon City. But I thought this was sort of I'm always interested in what comes in and out of depots, what comes in and out of cities. And I had to take a closer look and see that this Marathon City Brewery. So that's what was going out most likely that day. Just some shots of Elderon as it started to grow. The church, of course, the streets, the street scenes, the churches, the public schools, and in that day, quite a large public school. It was, I'm sure it served a lot of people in the rural areas surrounding Elderon, but this was quite a large, most likely maybe 2 or 4 classrooms in this public school. Again, another picture. Again, you notice the railroad tracks crossing Main Street, and of course with the up and coming communities. Here we have the Waverly Hotel in Elderon, another street scene. But so the trolleys coming out of Mosinee were kind of important, coming down 153. So at one time, a little bit of a trolley coming into Elderon. There's just I'm sorry that I just had to show this. This was just a made-up picture of a trolley by some noted photographer, and most likely he was from Wausau, Wisconsin. But anyways, he put some trolleys right down Main Street. He did this for a variety of cities, so a lot of cities were having this. And if you notice, he did a very good job because the electric wires coming off of the poles, but and the trolley line does cross the rails. So look out for cars. It says on the left-hand side that is not only for the trolley cars, but also for the railroad cars that are crossing the street. The photographer was quite noted, and a variety of, I think the Historical Society gets great pleasure in some of these, and postcards that demonstrate great photography, but also sort of demonstrating sort of the viability of some of these communities, just like Elderon. As you know, the Herald every once in a while would have in the early days would have a little bit of a report on what's going on. So what's going on in 1928 in Elderon? Well, this is just a little bit of you can sort of, but Glenn Halverston and Hillary are at the Wisconsin Rapids for a few days. The members of the intermediate department, most likely the school, reports on the people entertained at a farewell Sunday night for Raymond Dunbach, who was here on Monday from Cleveland, where he has accepted a position with a creamery. So again, a variety. I like to show these because it gives you a little bit of a sense of what was going on in Elderon. What was the social life like? A great deal of social life. The church, reporting of the church. Again, a little bit of a glimpse of what was going on in Elderon in 1928. So that, of course, Elderon is there today. It's a population of what? 276 in the 2020 census. So again, a little bit of a community, a village, a crossroads, but a great history, and the story of Elderon somewhat is repeated through other communities in Marathon County, but it does have its own unique perspective, and it does show us its own lessons with regard to history and the history of Marathon County. So with that, I'll turn it back to Ben.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, so there you go. There, as Gary said, there's Elderon. At least some of the early history there. Yeah. So again, we have one more week here of the villages as we're going through the and for those of you who maybe caught this is the image that we put together for the whole month of talks, and so this is the I think this is this is the one we had for the month, and Gary had actually shown the version that this was inspired by for Elderon. So, but anyway, we're going to be finishing up our month of villages by looking at Spencer next week. So again, there's going to be some very similar parts of the story here to Elderon and Hatley and Fenwood, but also some unique stuff too. So with that, I think, yeah, we'll wrap it up. Thanks for watching, and have a wonderful week, and hopefully to see you next week for